"You're not my blood, so you're not my problem anymore." The words detonated in the silent auditorium. Every rustle of a program stopped. Every smartphone camera, which had been dutifully recording the procession, froze. Even the restless toddler in the back row went quiet. I was standing on the floor of the auditorium, halfway to the stage, my name still hanging in the air from the principal's announcement, Ava Monroe. It was supposed to be my moment to glide across the stage, shake a few hands, accept my diploma, and offer a practice smile for the cameras, just like every other graduate that day. But instead, my adoptive father had just publicly disowned me in front of over 500 people. Before we dive deeper into this explosive family meltdown, I want to thank you for being here and sharing in these incredible stories of finding your own strength. If you believe that truth will always find its way to the light and that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, please think about subscribing. It costs nothing, and your support helps us share these messages with more people who need to hear them. Now, let's get back to the show. I'm cutting you off. "For good," Robert continued, his voice echoing with cold authority through the stunned silence. He was on his feet in the fourth row, arms folded across his chest like he was presenting a hostile takeover, not shattering a family. No more college tuition, no more support. You're on your own. That's when the collective gasp finally came. It was followed by a wave of hushed whispers. "Oh my God, and did he actually just say that?" rippled through the audience. I could see the little red lights of phones winking on, all pointed in our direction, capturing every second. By tomorrow morning, this would be a viral sensation. The girl who was brutally dumped by her father at her own graduation. What they didn't know was that they were only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Sophia, his wife, was desperately pulling at his suit jacket, hissing something I couldn't make out. Her face had turned ashen, a stark contrast to her pristine white dress. The infant in her arms, Robert's precious baby, as he loved to call him, started to fuss, as if he could feel the venomous tension in the air. I should have been crushed. I should have fled the auditorium, my face streaked with tears. That was the reaction Robert wanted. It was the reaction everyone in that room expected. Instead, I smiled. It wasn't a sad, broken smile, nor was it an embarrassed, apologetic one. It was a real smile, the kind that reached my eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. The kind Eleanor used to say could light up a whole room. Because Robert, in his infinite arrogance, had just handed me the perfect gift. "Well," I said, my voice projecting clearly into the podium microphone I was now approaching, "since we're all airing family secrets today." I reached into the portfolio that held my diploma cover and pulled out a crisp, white envelope. It was the same one I'd been carrying with me for the last 3 weeks, waiting for this exact moment. The very same envelope that held the power to detonate Robert's perfectly curated life. The principal, a flustered Mr. Davis, tried to gesture me towards the diploma table, clearly desperate to smooth over this horrifying interruption. But I wasn't going anywhere. I hadn't even started. I stepped right up to the podium. "Since Robert wants to get into a discussion about DNA," I said, adjusting the mic to my height, "let me share a little genetics lesson of my own." The auditorium was so still you could hear the hum of the ventilation system. Every single person was on the edge of their seat, leaning in. This was turning out to be far more interesting than any pre-written graduation speech. Sophia's face was no longer just white. It was a sickly shade of gray. She was shaking her head, a frantic, desperate motion, her lips forming the word "no" over and over again. The baby had escalated to full-blown crying, but she seemed completely oblivious to him. "You are 100% correct," I continued, locking my eyes on Robert. "I am not your biological daughter. I've known that my whole life. Eleanor told me when I was 12, and she made sure I never once doubted how much I was wanted and how deeply I was loved." Robert's confident smirk faltered. This was not the part of the script he had written. "But here's the thing about DNA secrets," I said, holding the envelope up for everyone to see. The people who throw the biggest stones often live in the most fragile of glass houses. I tore open the envelope, the sound of the ripping paper amplified to a deafening roar in the silent room. Your son, that perfect baby boy you've been parading around for the last 6 months, isn't actually your son. The resulting explosion of gasps and murmurs was instantaneous. People were getting to their feet, straining their necks for a better view. A sea of phones was now recording from every conceivable angle. Sophia has been having an affair with your own brother, Daniel, for more than a year, I went on, my voice unshakable despite the frantic pounding in my chest. The baby she's holding in her arms right now? That's your nephew, Robert, my cousin, not your son. Robert's legs buckled. He collapsed back into his seat as if his strings had been cut, his mouth hanging open, trying to form words that wouldn't come. Sophia let out a strangled, gasping sob and bolted for the exit, still clutching the baby. She was running, literally running, clambering through the rows of seated guests, tripping over feet in her ridiculously expensive heels. I have the DNA test results right here, I said, waving the official documents. Conclusive proof, a 99.9% match. Your wife's child is genetically your brother's son. The auditorium descended into absolute chaos. Voices overlapped. People were pointing. Some were even standing on their chairs to witness the fallout. My classmates on stage were completely forgotten, their own moments of glory eclipsed by this train wreck of a family drama. But I had one last thing to add. Oh, and Sophia? I called out, my voice carrying over the din, even though she was almost at the doors. You might want to be a little more discreet with your hotel receipts, and your jewelry receipts, and your restaurant receipts from all those long lunches with Daniel. She faltered, nearly dropping the baby, but recovered and kept running. The heavy auditorium doors slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing like a gunshot. I turned my attention back to Robert. He was staring up at me, his expression a fractured mosaic of confusion, betrayal, and utter devastation. He looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. "You wanted to cut me off?" I said, my voice clear and steady through the chaos. "You wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone. You wanted to make sure the world knew I wasn't really a part of your precious family." I walked to the very edge of the stage, looking down on the man who had tried to break me. Well, congratulations, you gave me the perfect platform to return the favor. The crowd was in a frenzy now. People were filming, snapping pictures, furiously typing on their phones, no doubt posting to social media. This would be a global story by nightfall. By tomorrow, everyone in our city would know that Robert Monroe, the celebrated businessman and community pillar, had been played for a fool by his own wife and his own brother. I calmly tucked the DNA results back into my portfolio and walked over to the diploma table. Mr. Davis, looking utterly shell-shocked, handed me my degree with a trembling hand. "Congratulations, Miss Monroe," he whispered, his eyes wide. "Thank you," I replied, turning to face the official photographer and giving him a bright, composed smile as if nothing had happened. It's certainly been a memorable day. As I walked off the stage, diploma in hand, I heard Robert's voice behind me, cracked and desperate. "Ava, wait. Please, we need to talk." But I didn't turn around. I didn't slow my pace. I had spent 18 years of my life craving his approval, his affection, his love. I had spent the last several months meticulously planning for this very scenario, knowing that it was only a matter of time before he tried to cast me aside. I just never dreamed he would make it so public and so easy. The trap he had laid for me, the public humiliation, the calculated cruelty, had backfired in the most spectacular way imaginable. He had intended to discard me quietly, to make me vanish from his life without a fuss. Instead, he had provided the stage, the lighting, and the audience for my ultimate revenge. And the most beautiful part of it all? Every single word I had spoken was the unvarnished truth. the DNA test, the affair, the receipts. I had proof for every last claim. It was the result of months of painstaking investigation, of shadowing Sophia, of gathering every piece of damning evidence I could find. Robert thought he was so clever, so strategic. He believed he could control me just as he controlled everyone and everything else in his orbit. He was so wrong. As I pushed open the heavy auditorium doors, the sounds of chaos still swirled behind me. Shouted questions, ringing phones, and Mr. Davis's desperate attempts to restore some semblance of order. But I was finished with all of it. Finished with Robert, finished with his fraudulent family, and finished with the charade of being grateful for the crumbs of affection he occasionally tossed my way. I had my diploma, I had a full scholarship to NYU, and I had the profound satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply telling the truth. The parking lot was nearly deserted. The drama inside was too captivating to leave. I walked to my old beat-up sedan, tossed my graduation cap onto the passenger seat, and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I saw the first wave of people spilling out of the auditorium doors, chattering excitedly, phones pressed to their ears. I allowed myself another small smile and pulled out onto the road. Let them talk. Let the entire world talk. I was finally, unequivocally, free. The drive from the school to my apartment should have taken 20 minutes, but in that short time, my mind replayed the last 18 years. Pulling into the parking spot of the small one-bedroom I'd rented the moment I turned 18, a flood of memories washed over me, powerful and relentless. They brought me home when I was 2 years old. I was too young to remember the specifics of the adoption, but I was old enough to always feel that the house was never truly mine. Eleanor showed me the photo albums when I was older. Pictures of me as a toddler, all chubby cheeks and wide, cautious eyes, clutching her leg while Robert stood stiffly in the background, looking more like he was posing for a corporate headshot than a family snapshot. Eleanor was the very definition of a mother. She would hum softly while she did the laundry, sing wonderfully off-key in the shower, and read me bedtime stories, creating a unique voice for every character. She possessed a kind of magic that could turn mundane moments into grand adventures. A trip to the grocery store became a treasure hunt. A rainy day became an epic fort-building quest. Our home always smelled of cinnamon and baked bread because she believed a house should feel like a warm hug. Robert was different. Not cruel, not in the beginning, but detached. Clinical. It was like he was an anthropologist observing our little family unit from a safe distance, never truly a part of it. At school functions, I'd watch other dads toss their kids in the air or mess up their hair. Robert would shake hands with my teachers and compulsively check his watch. When people would ask about me, he'd say, "This is Ava," with the same flat intonation he used to introduce a junior associate at his firm. I became more aware of it as I grew up, the way he never called me his daughter. The way our family dinners felt more like performance reviews, where I was expected to list my grades, my activities, my accomplishments. The way the rare family vacations he took were inevitably cut short by urgent work calls that simply couldn't wait. But Eleanor was the great equalizer. She compensated for his emotional void with a double dose of love, a double dose of attention, and a double dose of pride in everything I did. She was there for every school play, every science fair, and every soccer game where I spent most of my time on the bench. She was my anchor in a house that often felt more like a sterile hotel. Then, when I was 14, everything fell apart. Eleanor had been unwell for months, though she did her best to conceal it. I'd see her flinch with pain when she thought no one was watching, or I'd find her asleep in her armchair in the middle of the afternoon, something she never did. The cancer, once it was finally diagnosed, was aggressive and swift. By the time they found it, there was very little the doctors could do. I can still feel the cold of that hospital room. I was sitting by her bed, her hand in mine, when she gave my fingers a final faint squeeze. "Remember, my love," she whispered, her voice a thread. "You were wanted. You were chosen. Don't you ever let anyone convince you otherwise." Robert wept at her funeral, raw, ugly, gut-wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. But when I reached out to comfort him, to share in that grief, he recoiled. It wasn't until much later that I understood he wasn't just mourning Eleanor. He was mourning his buffer, the person who had made our stilted family dynamic functional. Without her, we were just two strangers cohabiting in a silent house. The quiet in our home became oppressive. Dinners were silent affairs, with Eleanor's empty chair gaping between us like a canyon. I would try to fill the silence, talking about school, my friends, anything to forge a connection. Robert would just nod and make non-committal sounds, his gaze always fixed on some distant point. 6 months after the funeral, he brought Sophia home. She was the Auntie Eleanor. Where my mother had been warm and nurturing, Sophia was sharp and glossy. She wore designer heels to go to the supermarket and never had a single hair out of place. Her laugh was too loud, her smile too wide, and her interest in me was so transparently false. "Oh, you must be the daughter," she'd cooed when we first met, as if I were a piece of furniture that came with the house. "Robert's told me so much about you." He hadn't, of course. I could tell by the way she stumbled through generic questions about school and my hobbies, like she was reading from a bad script. They married 8 months after that. A small ceremony, just close family and some of his business partners. I wore a simple black dress Eleanor had bought for me. Throughout the reception, Sophia made snide, passive-aggressive remarks about my somber phase to anyone who would listen. The house transformed after Sophia moved in. Eleanor's cinnamon and bread scents were replaced by overpowering, chemically scented diffusers. Her cozy, book-filled corners became minimalist display areas for Sophia's abstract art. Even the photographs changed. The pictures of our family, of me and Eleanor, were quietly moved to less conspicuous walls, replaced by large, professionally shot portraits of Robert and Sophia, looking like a power couple in a luxury magazine. Then came the pregnancy announcement. I was 16, eating a bowl of cereal at the breakfast bar, when Sophia theatrically placed a hand on her perfectly flat stomach and beamed that flawless smile. "We're having a baby," she declared, as if announcing a change in the weather. Robert's face lit up in a way I had never seen before. It was pure, unadulterated joy, the exact expression I had spent my entire life trying to elicit from him. He swept Sophia up in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen as she laughed and squealed that he'd make her dizzy. I just sat there, my spoon frozen midway to my mouth, a silent observer of a happiness that had absolutely nothing to do with me. In that moment, for the first time, I truly understood. I was the outsider, the placeholder, the obligation he had met but never embraced. "This is our second chance," Robert told me later that day, his hand resting protectively on Sophia's belly, "our chance to get it right from the start." The implication was as sharp as a shard of glass. I had been the practice run. This baby, his baby, would be the real deal. That was the beginning of my retreat. I started spending my evenings at the public library, staying until they closed, walking home through the quiet streets to clear my head. I got a part-time job at a coffee shop, partly for the money, but mostly for an excuse to be anywhere but home. School became my refuge. I joined every club, every study group, any volunteer opportunity that would keep me away from the nauseating domestic bliss of Robert and Sophia. The baby, a boy they named Leo, was born on a Tuesday in May. He was perfect and healthy, with a full head of dark hair. Robert cried again, but this time they were tears of joy. He held his son with a reverence I'd never witnessed, whispering promises of all the things they would do together. I watched from the doorway of the hospital room, feeling as invisible as ever, and wondered if he had ever held me like that. But it was during those long visits to the hospital that I first noticed something was off. Daniel, Robert's younger brother, seemed to be there an awful lot, more than a typical uncle. He'd show up with extravagant gifts and always found a reason to be holding Leo, especially when Robert was out of the room. I started watching them more closely after that. Daniel was a charming, wealthy tech entrepreneur who had never settled down. He had always been a favorite topic of Sophia's conversation at family dinners. Too much of a favorite, I now realized. The pieces began to click into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. The late-night phone calls Sophia would quickly end when I walked into the room. The shopping sprees where she'd return with items from boutiques Daniel had casually recommended. The way her entire face would light up whenever his name was mentioned, an expression she'd quickly try to suppress. 3 months after Leo was born, I was up late studying when I heard Sophia whispering on the phone in the kitchen. I told Daniel he can't keep sending gifts to the house, she was saying, her voice tense. Robert is starting to get suspicious about how much attention you're paying to the baby. My blood ran cold. I pressed myself flat against the hallway wall, straining to hear. I know you want to be part of his life, she continued, but we have to be so careful, at least until Leo is older. Then we can figure out a way to tell Robert the truth about his real father. I didn't sleep at all that night. I just lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, the words replaying in my mind. A part of me wanted to storm down there and confront her. Another part wanted to run to Robert and tell him everything. But a colder, more patient part of me, the part that had been cataloging years of slights and insults, decided to wait, to gather proof, to build a case so airtight it could never be denied, because a plan was already beginning to form in the back of my mind. A contingency plan, a way to use this devastating secret when the time was right. When Robert finally made his move to push me out completely. All I had to do was wait for the perfect moment, and graduation day, it turned out, was absolutely perfect. That overheard phone call was a turning point. I was no longer just the overlooked stepdaughter. I was an undercover agent in my own home, hunting for clues to confirm the unthinkable. And Sophia, for someone orchestrating such a grand deception, was incredibly careless. Or maybe she just assumed the quiet, bookish girl in the corner would never notice. Her Tuesday routine was the first major crack in her story. Every Tuesday morning, she'd announce she had a standing spa appointment downtown. She'd leave around 10 a.m., dress to kill, and return around 2 p.m. with perfectly manicured nails and an armful of shopping bags. But the timeline never added up. A 20-minute drive each way and an hour for a manicure left nearly 3 hours unaccounted for. So one Tuesday, I feigned a migraine and stayed home from school. I waited for her to leave, then got in my old sedan and followed her. She didn't go to the spa. She drove directly to the Grand Marquis Hotel on the other side of town. I parked across the street and watched as she strode into the lobby with an air of practiced confidence. Less than 20 minutes later, Daniel's sleek silver sports car pulled into the same parking garage. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the steering wheel. Suspecting was one thing, seeing it was another. This was real. This betrayal was happening right under Robert's nose, and I was the only one who knew. When Sophia got home that afternoon, nails a flawless shade of blush and bags from several high-end boutiques in hand, I asked her how her spa day was. "Oh, divine, as always," she chirped, showing off her nails. And I found the most darling little sailor suit for Leo at that children's shop on Elm Street. The lies flowed from her so effortlessly, each one delivered with that radiant smile and those wide, innocent eyes. The hotel was just the start. Once I was actively looking, the evidence was everywhere. There was her phone, which she was pathologically attached to, but the moment Robert walked into a room, she would flip its screen down or hastily shove it into her purse. One evening, she left it on the kitchen counter while she went to put Leo to bed. I had only a few seconds, but it was enough. Daniel's name was at the top of her message list. The preview read, "Can't wait for tomorrow. Same time. Same." Before the screen went dark. And then there were the gifts. Sophia had suddenly acquired a taste for very expensive jewelry, far beyond what even Robert's generous budget could support. There were the diamond studs that appeared after a supposed dentist appointment. The platinum watch, she claimed, was a surprise from Robert. And then there was the bracelet, a delicate gold chain with a single pearl. It was the final piece of the puzzle for me. It was the bracelet Daniel had given my mother, Eleanor, for her last birthday. It had been her favorite, and it had vanished from her jewelry box after she died. Now it was wrapped around Sophia's wrist like a spoil of war. The phone calls grew bolder. Late at night, I'd hear her hushed tones from the living room. "I told you, Robert has no idea. We just have to be patient. No, it's hard for me too, but we can't risk everything." I would press my ear to the door, my heart pounding, trying to piece together the fragments. But the most undeniable evidence came from the most innocent source, the baby himself. As Leo grew, it became glaringly obvious that he looked nothing like Robert. Robert had light brown hair and blue eyes. Leo had a mop of jet black curls and deep, dark brown eyes. His facial structure, the shape of his hands, even the lopsided way he smiled. It was all pure Daniel. The final verbal slip-up happened when Leo was about 4 months old. Sophia was bouncing him on her knee, making silly faces. "Come on, my little D," she cooed. "Give Mommy a smile. My little D. Not Leo." She caught herself instantly, her eyes darting around the room to see if anyone had heard. I was at the kitchen table, pretending to do calculus homework. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second, and I saw a flash of pure panic in hers. "I meant to say, my little dear," she said, her voice suddenly high-pitched and strained. That night, I knew what I had to do. Suspicions and overheard whispers weren't enough. If I was going to detonate this secret, I needed irrefutable, scientific proof. Getting the DNA samples was surprisingly simple. Daniel came over for Sunday dinner, a weekly ritual. While he was in the living room playing with Leo, I managed to snag a few strands of hair from the brush in the guest bathroom he'd used. Robert's sample came from his own hairbrush in the master suite. Leo's was the trickiest, but I waited until Sophia left his used pacifier on the end table, then discreetly slipped it into a Ziploc bag. I found a small, private lab that asked fewer questions, especially when I paid in cash and claimed it was for a school biology project. The lab tech, a weary-looking woman named Brenda, barely looked up. "Standard paternity analysis," she said. "Results will be ready in 2 to 3 weeks. We'll call you." Those 3 weeks were an exercise in agony. I watched Sophia play the part of the doting wife, watched Robert swell with pride over his son, and watched Daniel visit just a little too often, his gaze lingering on Sophia for a fraction of a second too long. The call came on a Thursday afternoon while I was at my coffee shop job. "Miss Monroe, this is Brenda from Precision Genetics. Your results are ready for pickup." My hands were shaking as I hung up. This was it, the point of no return. I drove to the lab in a daze, my stomach in knots. Brenda handed me a thick, sealed envelope. "It's all in there," she said. "The results are quite conclusive." I sat in my car for a long time, just staring at the envelope. Part of me wanted to tear it open right there. Another part wanted to drive to the nearest bridge and throw it into the river below. In the end, I drove home and hid the envelope inside my old, worn copy of Wuthering Heights. It was Eleanor's favorite book, one she'd read to me countless times. It felt right, hiding the proof of my family's ugly secrets within a story of such passionate, destructive obsession. I didn't open it, not for 2 weeks. I knew deep down that I was saving it. It was my insurance policy, a weapon to be deployed only when Robert finally went too far. As it turned out, I didn't have long to wait. The envelope remained hidden in my book for 2 weeks, a time bomb waiting for its trigger. That trigger was pulled on the morning of my graduation. I was in my room, zipping up my graduation gown, when I heard them arguing downstairs. "You can't be serious, Robert," Sophia's sharp voice cut through the floor. "She's your daughter." "She's my adopted daughter," Robert corrected her, his voice like ice, and it's high time she learned what the real world is like. I've done my duty. I tiptoed to the top of the stairs to listen. But to cut off her college fund? Today, on her graduation day? Sophia pressed. The timing is symbolic, Robert replied coolly. It's public, it's final. There will be no room for emotional appeals later. She needs to understand that she is not entitled to the fruits of my labor. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was a calculated, cruel, premeditated act of psychological warfare. He wanted to break me in front of the entire world. I finished getting ready, a strange sense of calm settling over me. I slipped the envelope from Precision Genetics into the portfolio with my diploma cover. The drive to the school was suffocatingly tense. Sophia kept shooting nervous glances at me in the rearview mirror. Robert stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. In the auditorium, I watched as other families celebrated. The Jacksons had a giant congratulations banner. The Wilsons had brought air horns. They were normal families, celebrating a normal rite of passage. Robert chose seats in the 4th row, close enough for his performance to be seen and heard clearly. When they finally called my name, Ava Monroe, I stood up and started the walk toward the stage. The auditorium fell into that respectful hush. This was it. This was my moment. And that's when Robert stood up, not to cheer, but to destroy. You're not my blood, so you're not my problem anymore. The words landed, and for a split second, the world stopped. Then the chaos he wanted erupted, but he had made a fatal miscalculation. He expected tears. He expected shame. He never, ever expected that I would be ready for him. Instead of retreating, I walked straight to the podium. Mr. Davis, the principal, looked at me with panicked eyes, but I just gave him a reassuring nod. I need to say something, I said into the microphone. I let the silence hang in the air for a dramatic beat. Since we're on the topic of family secrets, I began, my voice clear and strong, I think it's only fair that everyone hears the whole truth. I pulled out the envelope. Sophia's face went white. You're right, Robert, I said, pointedly using his first name. I'm not your biological daughter. I've always known that. My mother, my real mother, Eleanor, made sure I knew how wanted and loved I was. His smug expression began to curdle into confusion. This was not going his way. But you see, there's another secret in this family, I said, tearing open the envelope. Your son. That beautiful baby boy you've been doting on for 6 months. He's not your biological child either. The collective gasp was like a thunderclap. For over a year, your wife, Sophia, has been having an affair with your brother, Daniel, I announced, my voice ringing with triumph. The baby she is holding is your nephew, Robert, not your son. The scene imploded. Robert staggered back into his seat as if he'd been shot. Sophia, her face a mask of horror, made a choking noise and fled, stumbling through the crowd. I have the DNA results right here, I yelled after her, holding up the papers. A 99.9% probability that Daniel is the biological father. The auditorium was a madhouse. People were shouting, pointing, standing on their chairs. My classmates on stage were frozen, their mouths agape. I looked toward the doors where Sophia had vanished. And Sophia, you should really be more careful with your hotel and credit card receipts from all those business lunches with Daniel. I turned back to Robert, who was staring at me with the eyes of a man whose world had just been obliterated. You wanted to humiliate me? I asked, my voice cutting through the noise. You wanted to make sure everyone knew I wasn't really family? I took a step closer to the edge of the stage. Congratulations, you succeeded in giving me the perfect opportunity to return the favor. I walked off that stage, collected my diploma, and left the ruins of Robert's life behind me without a single backward glance. The parking lot felt like a different universe after the bedlam inside. It was quiet, calm, surreal. I sat in my car for a long moment, my hands finally starting to tremble as the adrenaline began to fade. My phone was already blowing up. A cascade of texts and missed calls from friends, classmates, even people I barely knew, all wanting to know if what they'd just seen was real. I switched it off and drove home in a bubble of silence. By the time I walked into my apartment, the story was already a local phenomenon. Someone had live-streamed the entire confrontation. Within a couple of hours, the video had tens of thousands of views and a torrent of comments. Local news sites were running headlines: graduation shocker, student exposes family's darkest secret, and DNA drama erupts at high school ceremony. I watched it all unfold on my laptop, feeling a strange sense of detachment. The girl in that video, so confident, so composed, so surgical in her delivery, hardly felt like me. Yet there I was, watching myself dismantle a family on a public stage. The media frenzy escalated with shocking speed. Local TV stations ran the story, then it was picked up by regional news, and by Wednesday, I was fielding calls from national talk show producers and tabloid reporters. I ignored them all. What I couldn't ignore was the real-world fallout. Sophia had simply vanished. A neighbor told a reporter they saw her packing suitcases into her car late that night. Leo strapped into his car seat before driving away without a word. Her meticulously curated social media presence was scrubbed from the internet. Daniel's response was predictable. First denial, then damage control. He lawyered up and issued a statement calling the DNA test a fabrication, and me a disturbed and vengeful teenager. But the proof was too public, too damning. His business partners started to distance themselves. His carefully crafted image was shattering. Robert's collapse was the most profound. Within 48 hours, he had filed for divorce and hired a private investigator who quickly unearthed a mountain of evidence of the affair. The revelation that his marriage, his brotherhood, and his fatherhood were all built on lies seemed to break something deep inside him. I felt no joy in watching his world burn. The revenge that had been my focus for so long had worked perfectly, but the victory felt hollow, tasting like ash. A week after graduation, I found him sitting on the steps of my apartment building. He looked 10 years older. His suit was wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were bloodshot and haunted. "Ava," he said, his voice a ragged whisper as he stood up. "Can we please talk?" My first instinct was to say no, to walk right past him and lock my door. But the utter defeat in his posture, the way his shoulders sagged, made me hesitate. "You have 5 minutes," I said. We sat on a bench in the small courtyard. "You were right," he said finally, his voice cracking. "You were right to do what you did. I wish I had been the father you deserved." I had rehearsed this conversation in my head 1,000 times, always imagining myself as cold and triumphant. But sitting next to this broken man, all I felt was a deep, weary sadness. "For the first time in my life," he continued, "I look in the mirror and I see guilt. Not just shame, but real guilt. For how I treated you. For how I let Sophia treat you. For letting my own brother make a fool of me." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, yellowed envelope. "Eleanor left this for you. I was supposed to give it to you when you turned 18, but I couldn't. I was a coward." My hands shook as I took the letter. Eleanor's elegant script on the front read, "For my darling Ava, when she's old enough to understand." "She knew," Robert said quietly. "She figured it out about Sophia and Daniel months before she died, but she never said anything. She was trying to protect you." I opened the letter, 2 pages filled with her familiar handwriting, shakier now from the illness. "My dearest Ava, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and Robert has finally found the courage to give it to you. I know about Sophia and Daniel. I see the way they look at each other. I could tell Robert. I could destroy them, but I won't, because you do not deserve to grow up in a house filled with that kind of poison. You are my daughter in every way that matters. Biology is just a science. Love is what forges a family. I chose you, Ava. I fought for you." Robert struggles to show love because he's afraid of it. He lost his own parents so young, he spent his life building walls. Be patient with him. He loves you more than he knows how to say. You have a fire in you that I never had. Use it to heal, not just to fight. I am with you always. You are wanted, you are loved, you are enough. Forever, your mother, Eleanor. Tears were streaming down my face. Beside me, Robert was sobbing quietly. I failed her, he whispered. I failed you both. I folded the letter, holding it to my chest. She loved us both, I said, even when she knew. I've changed my will, Robert said after a moment. The college fund is yours, with interest. The house, the business, everything that should have been yours is yours. I looked at him, and for the first time I saw the scared, lonely boy underneath the powerful man. I don't want your money, Robert. His face fell. Then what? How can I fix this? I want you to mean it when you say you're sorry, I said, standing up. And I want you to stop calling me Ava, like I'm just some person you know. I want you to call me your daughter. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a desperate hope. Can you ever forgive me? Daughter? The word hung in the air between us, a fragile bridge over years of pain. I thought of Eleanor's words. I thought about choosing to heal. Yes, I said softly, I forgive you. Letting go wasn't for him, it was for me. I walked back to my apartment building and I heard his voice, broken but clear. Thank you, Ava. Thank you. I didn't turn around, but I smiled. The lies were over. The truth, in all its painful glory, had finally set us free. My apartment felt lighter after that day. The decision to move out of Robert's house had already been made, but now it felt less like an escape and more like a beginning. Healing needed space. 18 years of my life fit into 6 boxes, mostly filled with books Eleanor had given me. At the bottom of one box, I found a small wooden music box. Inside, under a pressed flower and my first library card, was a folded piece of paper. It was a list in Eleanor's handwriting titled, Why We Chose Ava. She has curious eyes. Her smile is like sunshine. She's gentle with animals. She needs us as much as we need her. Below, in different ink, she'd added, Robert finally held her tonight. Really held her. I think he's falling in love, too. I sat on my floor and cried, not with sadness, but with a profound sense of discovery. I moved into a small studio near the university campus. It was the first space that was truly mine. A few weeks later, I got a call from a local family support center. They'd seen the news coverage and asked if I'd consider volunteering with their foster and adoption program. I started the next week. I didn't lecture the kids, I just listened. I shared parts of my own story. Do you hate your dad? A little girl named Maya asked me one day. I used to think I did, I told her. But really, I was just hurt, and anger felt safer than being hurt. So what do? She asked. You decide who you want to be, I said. You build your own family with people who choose you back. 3 months after graduation, Robert showed up at the center. He stood awkwardly in the lobby looking at the children's colorful artwork. He started coming to dinner after that, quiet meals in my tiny apartment where we slowly, carefully started to talk. He told me about losing his parents, about his lifelong fear of attachment. I told him about my classes and my work at the center. I'm proud of you, he said one night. Not for what you did, but for who you've chosen to become. 6 months after graduation, a package arrived with no return address. It was a photo album filled with pictures of me as a toddler, pictures I'd never seen. On the last page was a note. Your mother looked at these every night. She wanted you to know how much joy you brought her. A friend. Standing in my own apartment, surrounded by a life I was building myself, I finally understood what freedom was. It wasn't about being alone, it was about the power to choose. I was Ava Monroe, daughter of Eleanor, and in his own complicated way, of Robert. I was a student, a volunteer, a survivor. The girl on that graduation stage had been fighting for a place in a family. The woman I was becoming was building her own. And that, I realized, was a victory worth more than any revenge. If the story of graduation day justice had you on the edge of your seat, go ahead and hit that like button. My favorite part was when Ava pulled out that DNA test and the whole auditorium just erupted. What was your favorite moment? Let me know in the comments below. And for more incredible stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss an update. End of story.